Her groom walked away at the altar, in front of everyone, cameras flashing, her world shattering. Then the ground started shaking. 600 black SUVs blocked every road, and a Mafia boss stormed through the doors. He looked at her standing there in ruins and asked one question that changed everything. Who did this to you? The chandelier above Elena Martinez sparkled like 1,000 diamonds, casting golden light across the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom. 200 guests sat in pristine white chairs, their phones raised, capturing every angle of what was supposed to be Chicago's wedding of the year. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she held her bouquet of white roses. The ivory lace of her dress hugged her curves perfectly, and her dark hair was swept up in an elegant twist. She'd imagined this moment since she was 7 years old, playing bride with bedsheets in her family's cramped South Side apartment. Now, at 26, she was finally here. Jason Michael Hartwell, the priest's voice echoed through the marble-columned room. Do you take Elena Rose Martinez to be your lawfully wedded wife? Elena looked up at Jason, her heart swelling. His family owned 3 car dealerships across Illinois. He was handsome, stable, safe. Everything her mother had prayed she'd find. Everything that was supposed to lift her family out of the struggles they'd endured for generations. Jason's face was pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Jason, the priest prompted gently. The room held its breath. Jason stepped back. His hands dropped from hers like dead weight. I can't do this. 4 words. 4 simple words that detonated Elena's entire world. The bouquet slipped from her fingers, roses scattering across the white carpet. Around them, gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Someone's grandmother shouted in Spanish. Camera flashes exploded, not in celebration, but in shock. What? Elena's voice came out as a whisper. I'm sorry, Jason's voice cracked. He looked at the floor, at the walls, at anything but her. I can't marry you. I can't. I just can't. Jason, what are you? Elena reached for him, but he jerked away like her touch burned. I'm sorry, he repeated, and then he was backing down the altar steps, his groomsmen parting like the Red Sea, confusion plastered across their faces. Elena stood frozen, a statue in white lace. The priest touched her shoulder, but she couldn't feel it. Couldn't feel anything except the weight of 200 pairs of eyes boring into her skin. Her mother's wail cut through the chaos.
Dios mío.
What is happening? Jason's mother stood up, face flushed. Jason Robert Hartwell, you get back here this instant. But Jason was already pushing through the crowd, actually running, toward the exit. Elena's knees buckled. Her maid of honor, Claire, caught her elbow. Elena, breathe. Just breathe. But how could she breathe? How could she exist in a world where she'd just been abandoned at the altar in front of everyone she'd ever known? The cameras were still flashing. People were recording. By tonight, she'd be a trending topic, a meme, a cautionary tale. The pitiful girl who wasn't enough. Then, beneath the chaos of voices and movement, Elena heard something else. A low rumble, deep and resonant, like thunder rolling across the Chicago skyline. It grew louder. People near the windows turned, their expressions shifting from shock to confusion to something that looked like fear. What is that? Someone asked. Elena lifted her head, mascara-stained tears cooling on her cheeks. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she saw them. Black SUVs.
Dozens of them.
Maybe more. They poured down Michigan Avenue like a flood of obsidian, blocking intersections, sealing off side streets. The late afternoon sun glinted off their tinted windows. They moved with military precision, creating a perimeter around the hotel. The rumble became a roar. Oh my God, Claire breathed. Is that? The ballroom doors burst open. 6 men in dark suits entered first, their eyes scanning the room with the efficiency of trained soldiers. They weren't hotel security. Elena recognized the type. Her neighborhood had been full of men who carried themselves exactly like this. Men who answered to other men. Men who made people disappear. Behind them, a figure stepped through the doorway. Damien Russo. Elena's heart stopped for an entirely different reason. She hadn't seen him in 8 years. Not since the night he'd left the neighborhood in the back of a black car, 15 years old and already marked by violence. But she'd heard the stories. Everyone had. The boy who'd survived gang wars had become something far more dangerous, a man who controlled them. He was taller now, broader. The lanky teenager had been replaced by solid muscle beneath an immaculate charcoal suit. His dark hair was slicked back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, new since she'd last seen him. But his eyes, those were the same, dark and intense, capable of seeing straight through every lie. Those eyes found her instantly across the crowded room. The ballroom fell silent. 200 people collectively held their breath as Damien Russo walked down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing like gunshots. His men fanned out, covering exits. No one moved. No one dared. He stopped at the base of the altar, looking up at Elena. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of their shared past hung between them. Summers playing baseball in empty lots, his mother's funeral when he was 12, the night her father had thrown himself between Damien and a bullet meant for a rival gang member. When Damien finally spoke, his voice was quiet but somehow carried through the entire room. "Who did this to you?" Not "are you okay?" Not "what happened?"
Who?
Because Damien Russo didn't deal in accidents or misunderstandings. Someone had made a choice. Someone had hurt someone under his protection. And that someone was about to learn why the entire South Side whispered his name like a prayer or a curse, depending on which side of his mercy you stood. Elena opened her mouth, but no words came out. Behind Damien, somewhere in the chaos of the hotel entrance, came the sound of Jason Hartwell screaming. Jason's scream cut off abruptly. The sound of a scuffle echoed from the hotel lobby, then silence. Damien didn't turn around. His eyes stayed locked on Elena, waiting for an answer. Elena's mind raced. 8 years. 8 years since Damien had vanished into a world she only knew from news reports and neighborhood legends. And now he was here, in the middle of her destroyed wedding, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. "Damien," she whispered, finding her voice. "What are you doing here?"
His jaw tightened.
"I asked you a question first." 2 of his men dragged Jason back into the ballroom. The groom's perfectly styled blonde hair was disheveled, his boutonniere crushed. His face had gone from pale to gray. When he saw Damien standing at the altar, his legs nearly gave out. "Mr. Russo," Jason stammered. I didn't know." Quiet, Damien's voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the air like a blade. Jason's mouth snapped shut. Damien finally turned, taking in the scene with cold precision. The scattered roses. The priest backing away slowly. The guests frozen in their seats like they were watching a nature documentary and afraid any movement would attract the predator's attention. His gaze settled on Jason's parents, still standing near their seats, faces flushed with a mixture of outrage and dawning terror. "Richard Hartwell," Damien said conversationally, like they were old friends meeting for coffee. "Owner of Hartwell Auto Group. 3 dealerships. 4th one opening in Naperville next month." He tilted his head. Or it was anyway. Richard Hartwell's face went purple. "Now you listen here." "No," Damien cut him off. "You listen. Your son just humiliated a woman in front of 200 people. In my city. On streets I protect." He took a step closer to Jason, who flinched. "So, I'm going to ask one more time, and someone better start talking." "Why?" Jason looked at his father desperately. Richard's wife grabbed her husband's arm, whispering urgently. The calculation was clear on their faces. How much power did they have versus how much danger were they in? The math wasn't in their favor. "It was just cold feet," Jason's mother tried, her voice shaking. "He's young. He got nervous." "Cold feet don't make a man run." Damien's voice dropped lower. "Fear does." The words hung in the air like smoke. Elena stepped down from the altar, her dress rustling. Every head turned toward her. She walked past the priest, past her weeping mother, straight up to Damien. "Stop," she said quietly. Damien looked at her. Up close, she could see the tiny changes 8 years had carved into his face. The scar through his eyebrow, the hardness around his mouth, the weight of whatever he'd become sitting heavy on his shoulders. But underneath, she still saw the boy who'd taught her how to throw a curveball, the teenager who'd cried at his mother's grave while she held his hand. "Elena," he started. "I don't need this," she interrupted. "I don't need you to fight my battles. I needed him," she pointed at Jason without looking at him, "to love me. That's all. And he didn't. So it's done." Her voice cracked on the last word. Damien's expression shifted. The cold fury melted slightly, replaced by something that looked almost like pain. "Your father saved my life," he said softly, meant only for her. "I owe your family everything. You think I'm going to stand by while someone treats you like this?" "My father saved a 15-year-old kid," Elena replied. "Not she gestured at the armed men, the blocked streets visible through the windows. "Not whatever you are now." "I'm still that kid," Damien said. "At least where you're concerned." Before Elena could respond, Jason found his voice again. "It wasn't my choice." The words burst out of him like he'd been holding them in too long. "I didn't want to do it." Everyone turned. Jason was shaking, tears streaming down his face. "They said they'd destroy us. My family, the dealerships, everything. They said if I didn't walk away, they'd make sure we lost it all." Richard Hartwell went rigid. "Jason, shut your mouth." "Who said that?" Damien's voice was soft. Deadly soft. Jason looked at his father, then back at Damien. The choice was clear: betray whoever had threatened him, or face the man currently holding his fate in one hand. "I don't know his real name," Jason whispered, "but they called him Sal. He sent 3 guys to my office last week. Showed me pictures of my family. Said humiliating Elena publicly was the price for keeping everyone safe." The room seemed to tilt. Damien went perfectly still. His men exchanged glances. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper beard, stepped forward. "Boss," he said quietly. "Salvatore?" Damien's hands curled into fists at his sides. Elena didn't understand the significance of the name, but she understood the reaction. She'd seen men make that face before, the moment they realized they'd been played. "Everyone out," Damien said. No one moved at first.
Now.
The ballroom erupted. Guests scrambled for exits. Jason's family practically ran, dragging their son with them. The priest disappeared so fast he might have teleported. Within 2 minutes, the room was empty except for Elena, Damien, and his men. Elena stood in her ruined wedding dress, surrounded by scattered roses and shattered dreams, and asked the question that would change everything. "Who's Salvatore?" Damien looked at her, and for the first time since he'd arrived, she saw something other than controlled fury in his eyes. She saw fear. Damien stared at Elena for a long moment, then turned to his men. "Clear the hotel. I want eyes on every exit within 3 blocks. Find out everywhere Jason Hartwell has been in the last 2 weeks, who he talked to, who he met, what he ate for breakfast. Everything." The man with the salt and pepper beard nodded. "And Salvatore?" "Nothing yet," Damien said. "We confirm first, then we move." The men filed out, leaving Elena and Damien alone in the cavernous ballroom. The silence felt strange after all the chaos. Elena could hear her own heartbeat. "Salvatore Moretti," Damien finally said, walking toward the windows. "He was my mentor. Taught me everything about this life when I was 16 years old and stupid enough to think power was the same thing as safety." Elena followed him, her heels clicking on the marble. "And now he wants me dead. Or worse, he wants me weak." Damien's reflection in the window looked haunted. "Attacking you, humiliating you publicly. It's a message." He's telling everyone I can't protect the people I care about. I haven't seen you in 8 years, Elena said quietly. Why would he think you care? Damien turned to face her. Because some debts don't expire. 15 years earlier. The summer heat made the asphalt shimmer like water. 14-year-old Elena sat on her apartment building's front steps, a math textbook open on her lap. She was supposed to be studying for finals, but the sounds of the neighborhood were too distracting. Music thumped from open windows. Kids shrieked playing in the spray from a fire hydrant. And down the block, teenage boys postured and shouted at each other, the kind of shouting that preceded something bad. Elena's father, Miguel Martinez, walked past her carrying his metal lunchbox. His factory shift had just ended, and he looked exhausted. Poppy, Elena called. Are you okay? Miguel smiled at her, that warm smile that made the whole world feel safer. Siempre, mija. Always. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Elena screamed. Miguel's head snapped toward the sound. Down the block, the boys were scattering. More shots followed. Pop, pop, pop. Rapid fire. Then Elena saw him. Damien Russo, all 15 years old and skinny as a rail, running. Behind him, 2 older gang members raised their guns. Miguel didn't think. He just moved. He dropped his lunchbox and sprinted toward Damien, yelling something Elena couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. Miguel grabbed Damien's arm and yanked him behind a parked car just as bullets punched through the metal. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She watched her father shield a boy he barely knew with his own body, watched him stay there until the shooting stopped and the sirens started wailing. When Miguel finally stood up, his shirt was torn and his hands were shaking. But Damien was alive. Damien looked up at Miguel with wide, shocked eyes.
You.
Why did you? Because you're a kid, Miguel said simply. And kids shouldn't die in the street. Present day. He never asked for anything, Damien said, his voice thick with memory. After that day, my mother tried to give him money, tried to thank him somehow. He refused everything. Said he was just doing what anyone should do. Damien laughed bitterly. But nobody else did. Only him. Elena remembered that summer differently. She remembered Damien showing up at their apartment 3 days later with groceries. Expensive ones, the kind they never bought. Her mother had tried to refuse, but Damien's mother, Sophia Russo, had insisted. Your husband saved my son's life, Sophia had said, tears in her eyes. Let us do this. Please. It had been the beginning of something fragile, a connection between families from the same broken streets. Damien and Elena had become friends. Real friends. They'd played baseball in empty lots, studied together at the library, shared dreams about leaving the South Side someday. Then Sophia died when Damien was 15. Cancer. Fast and merciless. At the funeral, Damien had stood like a statue, his face empty. Only when Elena took his hand did he finally cry. 6 months later, he was gone. You disappeared, Elena said now. One day you were there, and the next you were just
gone.
I got pulled in, Damien said. After my mom died, I had nothing. Salvatore found me. He said he'd make me powerful, teach me how to survive. And he did, his jaw clenched. But everything has a price. By the time I realized what I'd become, it was too late to walk away. You could have said goodbye. I couldn't, Damien turned to face her fully. Because I knew if I saw you, if I saw your father, I wouldn't go. And if I didn't go, they would have come for me anyway. At least this way, I controlled it. Elena felt tears prick her eyes again, but she blinked them back. She'd cried enough today. When I finally had power, Damien continued, real power, I made myself a promise. Your family would always be protected. Always. I had people watching from a distance, making sure nothing touched you. I didn't know, Elena whispered. You weren't supposed to, he stepped closer. But Salvatore knows. He's known for years. That's why he did this, hitting you hits me. He's trying to prove I'm compromised, that caring about anyone makes me weak. Elena looked up at him. Does it? Yes, Damien admitted. But I don't care. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read the message, and his expression hardened. My men found something. Jason met with 3 of Salvatore's people 4 times in the last 2 weeks. They have photos. So what now? Elena asked. Damien's eyes met hers, and she saw the boy she'd known underneath the monster he'd become. Now, he said quietly, we make sure Salvatore regrets ever hearing your name. Elena's childhood home looked smaller than she remembered. The 2-bedroom apartment on South Halsted Street had housed her entire family for 20 years, her parents, herself, and for a while, her uncle Carlos and his wife. Now, 2 hours after the wedding disaster, it felt suffocating. Her mother, Rosa Martinez, paced the small living room, rosary beads clicking through her fingers. She'd been praying and crying in alternating waves since they'd arrived. The whole neighborhood saw. Rosa kept repeating in Spanish. Everyone. Maria Gonzalez was there. The Hernandezes. Father Gabriel. What will they think? Elena sat on the worn couch, still in her wedding dress. She tried to unzip it, but Claire had fastened so many tiny buttons that she'd given up halfway. Now, the dress felt like a prison. Mommy, please, Elena said tiredly. It doesn't matter what they think. Doesn't matter? Rosa spun around, her face flushed. You were left at the altar. On television. The cameras were everywhere, Elena. By tomorrow, everyone from here to California will know our shame. Our shame? Elena's voice rose. It wasn't me who ran away. Her father, Miguel, sat in his recliner by the window, quiet as always. He'd aged in the years since that summer he'd saved Damien. His hair had gone gray, and his factory work had bent his shoulders. But his eyes were still kind. Rosa, he said gently, our daughter is hurt. This isn't the time for. The apartment door burst open. Uncle Carlos strode in, his wife Linda trailing behind. Carlos was Rosa's younger brother, stockier and louder than anyone else in the family. He'd always had schemes, pyramid schemes, get-rich-quick plans, investments that never paid off. Now his eyes gleamed with something Elena recognized immediately. Opportunity. Is it true? Carlos demanded. Damien Russo showed up? At the wedding. Rosa crossed herself. Don't speak that name in this house. That name? Carlos laughed. That name owns half the South Side. Do you know what kind of connections he has? What he could do for this family? We don't want anything from him, Miguel said firmly. You don't, Carlos shot back. But maybe the rest of us do. He owes us, doesn't he? You saved his life, Miguel. That's got to be worth something. Elena felt sick. Uncle Carlos. Think about it. Elena, Carlos sat on the arm of the couch, too close. You're embarrassed now, sure. But Damien Russo is interested in you. Protective. That's power. That's leverage. You could. Get out, Elena's voice was ice. Carlos blinked. What? I said get out, Elena stood, and despite the ridiculous wedding dress, despite her smeared makeup and disheveled hair, something in her voice made Carlos lean back. My wedding just exploded in front of 200 people. I am not a business opportunity. I'm just saying. Carlos, Miguel's voice cut through the room like a knife. He rarely raised his voice, which made it all the more effective when he did. Leave. Now. Carlos's face reddened. He stood, brushing off his pants. Fine. But when you're all still stuck in this dump while Damien Russo lives in a mansion, don't come crying to me. He stormed out, Linda scurrying after him with an apologetic look. Silence fell over the apartment. Rosa started crying again, softer this time. This is all wrong. Everything is wrong. You were supposed to marry Jason. Have a nice house. Babies. A normal life. Jason didn't want that, Elena said hollowly. Or he did, until someone threatened him. Threatened? Rosa looked up sharply. What do you mean threatened? Elena realized she hadn't told them. In the chaos of leaving the hotel, of Damien's men securing their exit, of the drive home in stunned silence, she hadn't explained what Jason had confessed. She told them now. About Salvatore Moretti. About the threats against Jason's family. About how her wedding had been collateral damage in some mob power plays she didn't fully understand. Rosa sank into a chair, her face draining of color.
Dios mío.
We're in danger. No, Miguel said firmly. Damien said we're protected. Protected by a criminal. Rosa's voice pitched higher. Miguel, our daughter is mixed up with the Mafia now. Do you understand what that means? It means, Miguel said carefully, that someone tried to hurt him, and that he won't let it happen again. You trust him? Rosa asked incredulously. Miguel was quiet for a long moment. Then, I trust that he remembers what this family did for him. And I trust that he's more dangerous to our enemies than he is to us. Our enemies, Rosa repeated bitterly. Listen to yourself. We have enemies now. We didn't have enemies before today. We didn't know we had enemies, Miguel corrected. There's a difference. Elena watched her parents, her kind, hardworking parents who'd never asked for any of this, argue about mob politics and protection and danger. She thought about Uncle Carlos and his greedy eyes, about the neighbors who were probably gossiping right now, about the reporters who would be calling soon. Her phone buzzed. 23 missed calls. 47 text messages. Her social media notifications had been silenced, but she could see the numbers climbing. One text stood out, from an unknown number. Your family is safe. My word on it. D. Elena showed her father the message. Miguel read it, then nodded slowly. See, he said to Rosa. We're protected. At what cost? Rosa whispered. That was the question, wasn't it? Elena looked around the small apartment, at her mother's collection of saint figurines, at her father's worn work boots by the door, at the family photos on the wall showing happier times. Everything had changed today. Jason's betrayal had cracked open her world, and Damien's intervention had shattered it completely. Now the pieces were scattered, and she had no idea how to put them back together. Or if she even wanted to. I need to change, Elena said quietly, heading toward her old bedroom. Behind her, she heard her mother start praying again. Damien's estate sat on 5 acres in Oak Brook, 20 miles from the south side streets where he'd grown up. The house was all stone and glass, modern architecture designed to intimidate. Inside, the furnishings were expensive but sparse, more functional than comfortable. Damien had never cared about comfort. Comfort made you soft. He stood in his office, looking out at the manicured grounds. It was nearly midnight, but his inner circle had been summoned. They sat around the long table behind him, 5 men who'd been with him for years, who'd helped him build an empire from blood and strategy. Marco Vitali, his second-in-command, spoke first. The salt and pepper beard made him look older than 42, distinguished even. He'd been Damien's mentor after Salvatore, the one who'd taught him that loyalty mattered more than fear. Boss, we need to talk about the Martinez situation. Damien didn't turn around. What about it? It's a problem, said Tommy Chun, their financial strategist. Tommy was 30, brilliant with numbers and brutally practical. Salvatore is already spreading word that you went soft over a wedding. Our associates in Detroit are asking questions. So, is the New York family. Let them ask. It's not that simple, this from Victor Reyes, head of security. Victor was built like a tank, and twice as mean when necessary. You mobilized 600 men for a jilted bride. 600. We shut down downtown Chicago for 2 hours. The mayor's office is furious. The police commissioner called me personally, and Damien finally turned to face them. And we look unstable, Victor said bluntly. We look like we're making decisions based on emotion instead of strategy. Damien's jaw tightened. Miguel Martinez saved my life. His family is under my protection. That's not emotion, that's honor. Honor doesn't pay the bills, Tommy said. Honor doesn't keep our territory secure. And honor definitely doesn't stop Salvatore from using this woman as leverage against you. Her name is Elena. Elena, Tommy corrected without missing a beat, is a civilian with no connection to our world beyond a 15-year-old debt. Salvatore made her a target specifically to get to you. And it worked. You reacted exactly how he wanted. Marco leaned forward. What Tommy's trying to say? What I'm saying, Tommy interrupted, is that this woman is a liability. Every day she's in your orbit, she's a weakness Salvatore can exploit. He'll use her against you. Her family against you. Hell, he'll probably use her old high school friends if he thinks it'll work. So, what do you suggest? Damien's voice was dangerously quiet.
You bend in here.
Let Salvatore think he can attack anyone I've ever cared about without consequences. We suggest, Marco said carefully, that you handle this situation from a distance. Quietly ensure the family's safety, yes, but no more public displays. No more mobilizing armies. Let this fade into the background. The fifth man at the table, Anthony and DeMarco, their connections to the docks and unions, finally spoke up. He was the oldest at 56, scarred and weathered. The boys on the ground are talking Damien. They're saying you're distracted, that you're making this personal when it should be business. It is personal, Damien said. Salvatore made it personal when he targeted her. Exactly, Victor said. He's pulling your strings. Every move you make about this woman proves his point, that you can be manipulated through emotion. Damien slammed his hand on the desk. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. All 5 men went still. Miguel Martinez took a bullet for me, Damien said, his voice low and fierce. Not metaphorically. Not in some abstract way. He literally stepped between me and 3 gang members with guns when I was 15 years old. A factory worker with a wife and daughter, and he risked everything for a kid he barely knew. We understand, Marco started. Do you? Damien cut him off. Because I was nobody then. I was just another street kid who'd probably be dead in a year. Miguel had nothing to gain from saving me. No money, no power, no advantage. He did it because he thought it was right. Damien looked at each of them in turn. That kind of debt doesn't have an expiration date. No one's saying it does, Marco said. But there are ways to honor that debt without painting a target on yourself. The target's already there, Damien said. Salvatore didn't attack Elena because he thought I'd forgotten about the Martinez family. He attacked her because he knows I haven't. That I never will. Tommy shook his head. Then you're playing right into his hands. Maybe, Damien admitted. Or maybe I'm showing him that some lines can't be crossed. That there are things I won't compromise on, no matter the cost. The room fell silent. His men exchanged glances, communicating in that wordless way people who'd faced death together learned to do. Finally, Marco spoke, his voice softer than before. Boss, we've followed you for years. Trusted your judgment. But this is the first time I've seen you let emotion override strategy. And that scares me. Not because I don't understand why you're doing it, but because Salvatore is counting on exactly this reaction. Noted, Damien said flatly. Is it? Victor challenged. Because from where we're sitting, you're about to start a war over a woman you haven't seen in 8 years. A woman who, by all accounts, wants nothing to do with this life. She doesn't have a choice anymore, Damien said. Salvatore made sure of that when he destroyed her wedding. So now what? Tommy asked. You keep her close? Make her even more of a target. I protect her, Damien said. That's what happens now. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. For the first time in years, Damien's inner circle was questioning him, openly doubting his judgment. And the worst part? They weren't wrong. Damien knew he was compromised. Knew that every decision he made about Elena would be colored by memory and guilt and something he didn't want to name. But he also knew that if he backed down now, if he let Salvatore win this battle, it would never end. Meeting's over, Damien said. The men stood slowly, reluctantly. Marco lingered at the door. Be careful, boss, he said quietly. Salvatore's playing chess while you're playing checkers. And he's 3 moves ahead. After they left, Damien stood alone in his office, the weight of their warnings pressing down on him. They were right. All of them. But he didn't care. Jason Hartwell's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He sat in the back of his father's Mercedes, clothes thrown haphazardly into a duffel bag, trying to remember if he'd packed his passport. His phone had been off for 3 hours, ever since his father told him they were leaving Chicago.
Tonight.
Dad, maybe we should. Shut up. Richard Hartwell's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Just shut up, Jason. You've done enough damage. They were heading toward O'Hare International Airport, taking back roads to avoid traffic. Or maybe to avoid something else. Jason didn't know anymore. Everything since the wedding was a blur of panic and regret. He kept seeing Elena's face. The way her bouquet had fallen. The sound it made hitting the floor. I didn't want to do it, Jason whispered. Well, you did, his father snapped. And now we're all paying for it. The Mercedes turned onto a service road near the airport.
Dark.
Quiet. Empty warehouses stretched on either side. That's when Jason saw the headlights behind them. 1 set, then 2, then 5. Dad. Richard saw them too. He pressed the accelerator, but it was useless. The black SUVs moved like wolves, fast and coordinated. They cut off the Mercedes from every angle, boxing them in. The car screeched to a halt. Stay in the car, Richard ordered, but his voice shook. Doors opened. Men emerged from the shadows, 8 of them, maybe more. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. There was nowhere for the Hartwells to go. A tap on Jason's window made him jump. A man stood there, broad-shouldered and patient. He made a gesture. Roll it down. Jason's hand trembled as he obeyed. Jason Hartwell, the man said pleasantly. Step out of the vehicle, please. We're just leaving town. Richard called from the driver's seat. There's no trouble here. Mr. Russo would like a word, the man interrupted. With Jason. Just Jason. Jason felt his bladder threaten to give out. I already told him everything at the wedding. That was the public version, the man said. Now he wants the truth.
Come on.
Don't make this difficult. Jason looked at his father. Richard's face had gone gray, but he nodded slightly. What choice did they have? Jason stepped out of the Mercedes on legs that barely held him. They took him to a warehouse 3 blocks away. Inside, the space was mostly empty except for some old crates and a single folding chair positioned under a hanging work light. It looked like something from a movie. A bad movie where people didn't walk out. Jason was guided to the chair. He sat. The men formed a loose circle around him, not threatening but absolutely present. Then Damien Russo walked in. He'd changed since the wedding. No suit jacket now, just a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked almost casual. That somehow made him more terrifying. Damien pulled up a crate and sat across from Jason, close enough that their knees almost touched. Tell me about Salvatore, Damien said. Jason's mouth was so dry he could barely speak. I told you at the wedding. You told me he threatened you. Now I want details. When did you first meet him? What exactly did he say? What did he promise? Damien's voice was calm, almost gentle. Start from the beginning. Jason swallowed hard. Behind Damien, one of the men cracked his knuckles, probably by accident, but Jason flinched anyway. 3 weeks ago, Jason began. 3 guys came to the dealership, asked to see me privately. I thought they were customers at first, but he shook his head. They showed me pictures. Pictures of what? My parents. My sister in Boston. Her kids, Jason's voice cracked. They had photos of them at school, at the grocery store, at home. They knew everything. Where everyone lived, where they worked, what time they left the house. Damien's expression didn't change. What did they want? They said their boss had a message. That I needed to call off the wedding to Elena Martinez. Jason looked down at his hands. I told them I couldn't do that. Elena and we'd been planning this for a year. Her family spent money they didn't have on the venue, the dress, everything. But you did it anyway. They said if I didn't, my family would pay. Not just financially, they showed me photos of car accidents, house fires, missing person reports. They said these were examples of what happens to people who don't cooperate. Tears streamed down Jason's face now. What was I supposed to do? Let my sister's kids get hurt? Let my parents lose everything. So you chose to destroy Elena instead. The words hit like a physical blow. Jason hunched forward, sobbing. I know what I did. But they said it had to be public. Had to be humiliating. That was the whole point. Maximum embarrassment for maximum impact. Did they say why? Jason nodded miserably. The last time they came, 2 days before the wedding, one of them told me. He said their boss wanted to send a message to someone. That embarrassing Elena publicly would hurt this person more than any physical attack could. He said my name, Damien stated. It wasn't a question. Not at first. But yeah, eventually. He said you had a soft spot for Elena's family. That you'd react emotionally. And that Jason wiped his face with his sleeve. He said, a king who falters for a woman is easier to dethrone. Damien went very still. Those exact words, he asked quietly.
Yes.
I remember, because it sounded like something from Game of Thrones or whatever. Behind Damien, the men exchanged looks. One of them, Marco, Jason thought, shook his head slightly. Damien stood up. He walked a few steps away, hands in his pockets, thinking. Did you ever meet Salvatore directly? He asked, his back still turned.
No.
Just as guys. Would you recognize them again? Yes, Jason said immediately. I'd recognize them anywhere. Damien turned back around. You're going to look at some photos. You're going to identify everyone you met with. Times, dates, locations, everything. And then you're going to disappear for a while. Disappear? Salvatore will know I found you. He'll expect retaliation. The safest place for you is somewhere he can't find you. Damien's eyes were hard. That's more than you deserve after what you did to Elena, but I'm not going to start a war over you. Jason nodded frantically. Thank you. Thank you, Don't thank me. Damien cut him off. If you ever come back to Chicago, if you ever contact Elena again, if you even think about her too hard, we'll have another conversation. And you won't like how it ends. The restaurant was called Il Padrino, the Godfather. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. It sat on the corner of Taylor Street in Little Italy, a neighborhood that existed more as a tourist attraction now than an actual Italian enclave. But the restaurant's private back room still hosted the kind of meetings that never appeared on any reservation book. Damien arrived alone, as requested. His men waited outside in 3 SUVs, visible but not threatening. A show of respect. Or at least the appearance of one. The maitre d' led him through the empty dining room to a door at the back. Inside, Salvatore Moretti sat at a small table, a bottle of wine already open, 2 glasses poured. Salvatore looked like someone's kindly grandfather. 73 years old, white hair perfectly combed, a cardigan over his dress shirt. He could have been meeting friends for brunch instead of the protégé he'd tried to manipulate. Damien, Salvatore said warmly, standing to embrace him. Come, sit. It's been too long. Damien returned the embrace, feeling the old man's frailty. Salvatore had cancer, Damien knew. Prostate. Treatable but spreading. Maybe that explained some of this. A dying man trying to secure his legacy. Or maybe Salvatore had just always been this ruthless, and Damien had been too young to see it. 2 years, Damien said, sitting across from him. Chicago and Detroit don't overlap much these days. My choice or yours? Salvatore asked with a slight smile. Mutual, I think. Salvatore poured more wine into Damien's glass, even though it was still full. An old power move, controlling the small things to remind everyone who controlled the larger ones. I heard about the excitement downtown yesterday, Salvatore said conversationally. 600 vehicles? Very dramatic. Very public. Word travels fast. It always does. Salvatore sipped his wine. A wedding, they tell me. The bride was left at the altar, and you rode in like a knight in shining armor. Or should I say, a knight in armored SUVs. Damien kept his expression neutral. The bride's father saved my life when I was a kid. I owed him a debt.
Ah, yes.
Miguel Martinez.
Good man.
Worked at the factory on Ashland, didn't he? Before it closed, Salvatore's eyes gleamed. Funny thing about deaths, Damien. Most people would send flowers after something like that. Maybe a check. But you shut down half of Chicago. The situation required a response. Did it? Salvatore leaned back in his chair. Or, did you want it to require a response? There's a difference. The subtext was clear. They both knew Salvatore had orchestrated the wedding disaster. But neither would say it directly. This dance required finesse, layers of meaning beneath every word. I'm curious, Damien said. When did you start keeping tabs on my personal life? My associations from before? I keep tabs on everything, Figlio, son. The old endearment felt like acid now. That's how I stayed alive this long. You taught me that, didn't you? I taught you to be smart, Salvatore corrected gently. To think 3 moves ahead. To never let emotion cloud your judgment. He paused, letting the words settle. Do you remember the first lesson I ever gave you? Damien remembered. He'd been 16, angry and reckless after his mother's death. Salvatore had taken him under his wing, given him purpose. You said weakness is anything your enemy can exploit. Exactly, Salvatore smiled like a proud teacher. And what's the greatest weakness a powerful man can have? Damien didn't answer. He knew where this was going. Love, Salvatore said softly. Loyalty. Connection. All those beautiful things that make us human also make us vulnerable. A man with nothing to lose is unpredictable, dangerous. But a man with something to protect. He shrugged. That man can be controlled. Is this a lecture or a threat? Neither. Its concern, Salvatore's expression shifted to something almost genuine. I care about you, Damien. I raised you in this life. Taught you everything I know. But lately, I worry you've forgotten those lessons. I haven't forgotten anything. No? Then why did you mobilize an army for a woman you haven't seen in 8 years? Why make such a public spectacle over something that could have been handled quietly? Salvatore leaned forward. People are talking, Damien. They're saying you're distracted. Compromised. They're wondering if you're still fit to hold your territories. Let them wonder. I'm trying to help you, Salvatore said, his voice hardening slightly. This girl, Elena Martinez, she's become a symbol. Your enemies see her as a pressure point. Every time you act on her behalf, you prove them right. Damien met his old mentor's eyes. And who are these enemies, Salvatore? Anyone I know. The moment stretched between them, pregnant with unspoken accusations. Then Salvatore smiled. Everyone has enemies in this life, Figlio. The question is whether we recognize them before it's too late. I always recognize them, Damien said quietly. Eventually, Salvatore's smile didn't falter, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Or calculation.
I hope so, Salvatore said.
Because the world we built, you and me and all the others, it doesn't forgive weakness. And it certainly doesn't forgive kings who fall for queens. She's not a queen. She's a civilian. Then why does she matter so much? Damien stood. The meeting was over. He'd gotten what he came for, confirmation that Salvatore was behind everything, wrapped in enough plausible deniability that neither could act openly.
Yet.
Thank you for the wine, Damien said. Salvatore stood as well, slower. You're leaving already? We haven't even eaten. I've lost my appetite. Pity. Salvatore walked him to the door. Damien? One more thing. Damien turned. That girl at the altar, Elena. She looked beautiful in the photos. Tragic, but beautiful. Salvatore's smile was gentle, grandfatherly. It would be a shame if something happened to her. To any of the Martinez family, really. Such good people. So undeserving of our world's darkness. There it was. The threat, delivered with a smile and a shrug. Damien felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. Not fear. Not anger. Something worse, certainty. This wouldn't end with diplomacy. If anything happens to them, Damien said softly, there won't be enough of this city left for you to hide in. He walked out, leaving Salvatore standing in the doorway. Outside, Marco opened the SUV door. How'd it go? Damien slid into the back seat, his mind already racing ahead, planning. He wants a war, Damien said. So we'll give him one. Elena found Damien's address through her father. Miguel had been reluctant to share it, but she'd insisted. She needed answers, and she needed them from the source. The Uber driver's eyes widened when they pulled up to the gates of the Oakbrook estate. "You sure this is the right place, miss?" "I'm sure." Elena paid him and stepped out. The gates opened before she could press the intercom. Security cameras, probably. She walked up the long driveway, her sneakers crunching on gravel. She dressed simply, jeans, a sweater, her hair pulled back. No more wedding dress. No more pretending to be someone she wasn't. Marco met her at the front door. "Miss Martinez. The boss is." "I know where he is," Elena said, pushing past him. She'd never been here before, but she knew Damien. He'd be somewhere he could see everything coming. Somewhere with windows and exits and control. She found him in his office on the second floor, standing at the window overlooking the grounds. He didn't turn when she entered. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Too bad." Elena closed the door behind her. "We need to talk." "Elena." "No." Her voice cracked like a whip. "You don't get to Elena me. You don't get to show up at my destroyed wedding, mobilize an army, and then disappear while I sit at home like some damsel waiting to be rescued." Damien finally turned. He looked tired. Good. She hoped he hadn't slept. "Your father asked me to keep you safe," he said. "That's what I'm doing." "My father asked you nothing. You decided. You decided to make me a part of whatever this is, this war or game or whatever you want to call it, without asking if that's what I wanted." "You think you had a choice?" Damien's voice rose. "Salvatore already made you a target."
"I didn't do that."
"He did. And you made it worse." Elena shouted. "You think showing up with 600 SUVs made me safer? You think threatening Jason's family, dragging me deeper into your world, you think any of that helped?" "I think," Damien said slowly, "that if I'd done nothing, Salvatore would have seen it as permission to do worse. To your family. To you. I don't need your protection." "Yes, you do." Damien slammed his hand on the desk. "You just don't want to admit it. You want to pretend this is still your choice, that you can just walk away and go back to your normal life. But that life is gone, Elena. It ended the moment Jason walked away from that altar." The words hit her like a slap. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough. "I needed him to love me," she said, her voice breaking. "That's all I needed. Not you to fight my battles. Not some mafia boss to swoop in and make everything worse. I just needed the man I was supposed to marry to actually want me." The silence that followed was heavy. Damien's expression softened. "He did want you. Clearly not enough." "No." Damien walked closer. "You don't understand. Jason didn't leave because he didn't love you. He left because Salvatore threatened to kill his family if he didn't." Elena blinked. "What?" "Sit down," Damien said gently. "I don't want to sit. Please." Something in his voice made her comply. She sank into the leather chair across from his desk, her legs suddenly weak. Damien told her everything. About finding Jason. About the threat Salvatore's men had made. Pictures of Jason's family. Promises of violence. The specific demand that Jason humiliate her publicly. About how it was all designed to make Damien look weak. To prove he couldn't protect the people he cared about. "You were bait," Damien said quietly. "From the beginning. Salvatore knew about my connection to your family. He knew I'd react. So he orchestrated the whole thing. Found your fiancé, threatened him, forced him to destroy you in the most public way possible. All to get to me." Elena felt like she'd been punched. Jason was threatened. Yes. His family was in danger. Yes. And he chose them over me. Elena's voice was hollow. He let me stand there in front of everyone, and he let me believe I wasn't enough. He was terrified, Damien said. I'm not excusing it. What he did was cowardly. But he was caught between two impossible choices. Elena's hands curled into fists. No. He had a third choice. He could have told me. We could have faced it together, called off the wedding privately, done something other than humiliating me in front of 200 people. You're right, Damien agreed. He should have. But fear makes people selfish. Elena stood abruptly, pacing the office. Her mind was racing. Everything she'd thought about the wedding, that she wasn't pretty enough, wasn't interesting enough, wasn't enough, period. All of it was a lie. Jason hadn't rejected her because of her. He'd rejected her because some mob boss she'd never met wanted to hurt Damien. She'd been collateral damage. The grief that had been crushing her for 2 days began to transform. It twisted, sharpened, became something hotter and harder. Anger. Where is he? Elena asked. Salvatore? Jason. Safe. Out of state. He identified Salvatore's men for us, and I sent him away. You let him go? Elena spun to face Damien. He destroyed my life, and you just let him leave. What did you want me to do? Kill him? He's a coward, but he's not the real enemy here. Elena knew he was right. Jason was just a pawn. But the pawn had still chosen to sacrifice her. I want to see the evidence, Elena said. The photos Jason identified. Salvatore's men. All of it. Damien frowned. Why? Because I'm done being the victim in this story. Elena's voice was steel. Because everyone keeps making decisions for me. Jason, Salvatore, you, and I'm tired of it. If I'm already a target, if my life is already destroyed, then I get to decide what happens next. Damien studied her face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Elena said slowly, that Salvatore used me to make you look weak. So let's use that. Let's make him think it worked. And then we show him exactly how wrong he was. For the first time since she'd arrived, Damien smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. Tell me more, he said. The headline hit the Chicago Tribune's website at 6 a.m. Mob boss shuts down city for jilted bride. Is Damien Russo losing his grip? By noon, every news outlet in the city had picked it up. The stories spread like wildfire. Grainy cell phone footage of the SUV convoy, interviews with hotel guests, speculation about Damien's emotional instability. One particularly vicious gossip blog ran with, "When Gangsters Fall in Love, How One Woman Brought Chicago's Most Feared Man to His Knees." Elena sat in her parents' living room, scrolling through her phone, watching her life become entertainment. The wedding video had been leaked. Some guest had sold it to TMZ. She watched herself stand frozen at the altar, watched Jason run, watched the exact moment her world had shattered. The video had 3 million views. Her phone rang. Another reporter. She'd stopped answering after the 15th call. Outside, a news van was parked across the street. They'd been there since dawn, hoping for a statement. Elena's mother had closed all the curtains, making the apartment feel like a tomb. They're saying terrible things, Rosa said, clutching her rosary. That you and Damien are. We're not anything, Mommy. But the way he looked at you in the ballroom, the photos are everywhere. People are saying. I don't care what people are saying. That was a lie. She cared. Every comment, every cruel joke, every pitying look from former friends, she felt all of it. But she was learning to turn that pain into something useful. Her phone buzzed. A text from Damien. Check the news. Jason's father just filed a lawsuit. Elena pulled up the article. Richard Hartwell was suing for criminal intimidation, kidnapping, and emotional distress. He'd held a press conference that morning, playing the victim. Claimed Damien's men had abducted Jason, threatened his family, and forced him to leave the state. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He's the one who was threatened first, Elena muttered. But the public didn't know that. They only saw what Salvatore wanted them to see. A powerful mob boss losing control over a woman, making reckless decisions, showing weakness. In the South Side neighborhood where Elena had grown up, the gossip was even worse. Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B told anyone who'd listened that Elena had always been ambitious, always looking for a way out. The implication was clear. She'd somehow orchestrated this for attention. Mr. Chin from the corner store started locking his door when Elena's family walked by. Trouble, he'd say. That family is trouble now. Some of the neighborhood kids threw rocks at the apartment windows. Miguel had to replace the glass twice before Elena convinced him to just board it up. But there were others, people who'd known them for years, who left groceries on the doorstep anonymously, who nodded in solidarity when they passed on the street, who remembered that the Martinez family had always been good people and good people didn't deserve this. The neighborhood was splitting, just like everything else. Damien's lieutenants gathered in his office, their frustration barely contained. Detroit is pulling back from the shipping contract, Tommy said, throwing a folder on the desk. They said they need to reassess their partnerships. That's code for "we think you're compromised." New York called, Victor added. They want a meeting. They're concerned about stability in the Midwest region, also code. Marco paced by the window. The cops are crawling all over our operations. The mayor's office is making noise about organized crime crackdowns, and Salvatore's people are spreading rumors in every bar, club, and back room from here to Milwaukee. What kind of rumors? Damien asked, his voice dangerously calm. That you're distracted. Emotional. That you mobilized 600 men for a woman you're sleeping with. I'm not sleeping with her. Doesn't matter, Tommy said. Perception is reality in this business. And right now, everyone perceives you as weak. Anthony DeMarco spoke up from the corner. The union guys are asking questions too. They want to know if you're solid. If you can still protect the pipeline. I can protect it. Can you? Victor challenged. Because from where we're standing, you're spending all your time and resources on a civilian while our actual business falls apart. Damien's hands clenched into fists. Salvatore orchestrated this. All of it. He wanted this exact reaction: chaos, doubt, division. If we back down now. We're not saying back down, Marco interrupted. We're saying be smart. Handle this quietly. Stop making grand gestures that play right into his hands. I am being smart. Are you? Tommy pulled out his tablet, showing headlines and social media posts. Every news outlet is running stories about the lovesick mob boss. Every rival organization is watching to see if you'll crack. And every cop in Chicago is looking for an excuse to bring you down. This isn't smart, boss. This is suicide. The office fell silent. Damien looked at each of them. These men who'd followed him for years, who'd built an empire with him. They weren't wrong. Everything they said was tactical, logical, correct. But they didn't understand. Couldn't understand. Miguel Martinez saved my life, Damien said quietly. And I swore, to myself, to his memory, to everything I believe, that his family would always be protected. Always. That's not emotion. That's honor. And the day I compromise on honor is the day I become exactly what Salvatore is. Honor doesn't stop bullets, Victor said. No, Damien agreed. But it's the only thing that separates us from animals.
His phone rang.
He glanced at the screen. Elena. We're not done here, Marco said. Yes, Damien replied, answering the call. We are. The lieutenants exchanged looks but filed out. The fracture in Damien's organization was showing. Salvatore was winning without firing a single shot. I have an idea, Elena's voice came through the phone, about how to stop this. But you're not going to like it. Damien leaned back in his chair, exhausted. Try me. I'm going to hold a press conference, Elena said. Tomorrow. And I'm going to tell them everything. Absolutely not. Damien's response was immediate. Elena had expected it, but his tone still stung, protective, dismissive, like she was a child suggesting something dangerous. You didn't let me explain. I don't need to hear it. A press conference puts you directly in Salvatore's crosshairs. The answer is no. Elena's grip tightened on her phone. It's not your decision. Elena, listen to me. No, you listen, her voice was steel. For 2 days, I've watched people tear me apart online. I've seen my family harassed, my neighbors turn against us, reporters camp outside our home.
And why?
Because Salvatore wanted to use me as a weapon against you. Well, I'm done being used. Going public won't change that. It will if I control the narrative, Elena said. Right now, Everyone thinks you're the unstable one, the mob boss who lost his mind over a jilted bride. That's exactly what Salvatore wants. But what if I flip it? What if I expose what really happened? Damien was quiet for a moment. If you accuse Salvatore publicly, I'm not going to name him. I'm not stupid. Elena paced her bedroom, her mind racing. But I can tell the truth about Jason being threatened, about the wedding being sabotaged. I can show everyone that I'm not some helpless victim, and you're not some lovesick fool. We were both targeted. It won't work, Damien said, but she heard the doubt in his voice. Why not? Because Salvatore will spin it. He'll make you look like you're covering for me, or worse, like you're part of my organization. It'll put an even bigger target on your back. The target's already there, Elena said, echoing Damien's own words from earlier. At least this way, I'm firing back. Another pause. Longer this time. What exactly would you say? Damien asked. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. at a small community center in Elena's neighborhood. Not a fancy hotel ballroom this time. Somewhere real, somewhere that represented who she actually was. Damien's people had tried to secure the location, add security, control the guest list. Elena vetoed all of it. If this looks like a mob production, it defeats the purpose, she told Marco, who'd shown up at her apartment that morning with a whole security plan. I need to look like a regular person telling the truth. Not like I'm reading from your script. The boss won't like this, Marco warned. The boss isn't my boss, Elena replied. Now she stood behind a simple podium, facing 24 reporters and 3 times as many cameras. Her hands shook slightly, but she kept them visible. No hiding, no pretending to be stronger than she was. Claire stood to her left, moral support. Her parents sat in the front row, her mother still clutching that rosary, her father's face carved from stone. Elena had dressed carefully, a simple blue blouse, black slacks, minimal makeup. She looked professional but approachable.
Real.
She cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. 2 days ago, I was left at the altar in front of 200 people, Elena began. Her voice was steady. The video has been viewed millions of times. I've been mocked, pitted, analyzed, and turned into a punchline. So, I'm here to set the record straight. Phones raised. Cameras clicked. She had their attention. My fiancé, Jason Hartwell, didn't get cold feet. He didn't suddenly realize he didn't love me. He was threatened, she paused, letting that sink in. 3 weeks before our wedding, men approached him with photos of his family, his parents, his sister, her children. They told him that if he didn't publicly humiliate me at the altar, his family would be harmed. Financially. Physically. They were specific about what would happen. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions, but Elena raised her hand. Jason made a choice. A cowardly choice, but a choice. He chose to protect his family by destroying me. I understand why he did it. I don't forgive it, but I understand. Her voice hardened. What I won't accept is being used as a weapon in someone else's war. Who threatened him? A reporter shouted. I can't name names without proof, Elena said. But the important thing isn't who did it, it's why. Someone wanted to humiliate me specifically because they knew it would hurt someone else. I was never the target. I was the bait. She leaned into the microphone, her eyes scanning the crowd. I was never the weak link. I was the bait. And I won't be used again. The room exploded with questions. Are you referring to Damien Russo? Is he the someone else you mentioned? Are you and Mr. Russo in a relationship? Elena held up her hand again. Damien Russo's connection to my family is simple. When he was 15 years old, my father saved his life. That created a debt he takes seriously. When I was attacked, and make no mistake, sabotaging my wedding was an attack, he responded to protect me. Not because we're romantically involved. Not because he's obsessed or unstable. But because he's loyal to the people who showed him kindness when he had nothing. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. The narrative that's been spread that he's weak, distracted, compromised, that's exactly what the people who targeted me wanted. They thought using me would make him look like a fool. But all they proved is that he's a man of his word. And I'm a woman who refuses to be anyone's pawn. In the back of the room, one of Damien's men stood watching. Marco had insisted on at least one person present, and Elena had allowed it. What she didn't see was the other man, one of Salvatore's people, who'd slipped in with the press. He was already texting his boss, and his message was simple. She flipped the script. This is a problem. 3 miles away, in a restaurant office, Salvatore Moretti read the text message 3 times. He'd underestimated her.
Badly.
He'd assumed Elena Martinez was just a pretty face, a convenient target, a civilian who'd crumble under pressure. Instead, she'd walked into a room full of predators and reclaimed her story. Worse, she'd done it without naming him, which meant he couldn't retaliate without confirming her implications. The girl had just checkmated him in public. Salvatore set down his phone and smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Clever, he murmured. She's clever. That made her dangerous. And dangerous pieces needed to be removed from the board. Elena's press conference went viral within an hour. By evening, it had been picked up by national news. The narrative was shifting from mob boss loses control to woman refuses to be victim. Social media exploded with support. #NotTheBait was trending. Damien watched the coverage from his office, Marco standing beside him. She did well, Marco admitted grudgingly. Better than I expected. She's smarter than all of us gave her credit for, Damien said. His phone buzzed. An encrypted message from one of his informants inside Salvatore's organization. Old man is furious. Meeting called for tonight. Warehouse on Polk Street.
He's planning something.
Damien stared at the message. Polk Street. That warehouse had been one of Salvatore's old teaching grounds, where he'd taken young Damien years ago to show him how to handle problems. The location wasn't random. It was an invitation. A challenge. It's a trap, Marco said, reading over his shoulder. Of course it is, Damien's mind raced through possibilities. Salvatore was angry, which made him dangerous, but also predictable. The old man taught Damien everything he knew about manipulation and misdirection. He'd use Elena's press conference as bait, expecting Damien to react emotionally. Expect Damien to come rushing in to protect her, leaving himself vulnerable. What if we don't take the bait? Marco suggested. We don't, Damien said. But we make him think we did. 2 hours later, Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Martinez, the voice was elderly, refined, unfamiliar. My name is Salvatore Moretti. I believe we should meet. Elena's blood went cold. She was in her bedroom, and she'd been half expecting this call since the press conference ended. Still, hearing his voice made it real. Why would I meet you? Because you made yourself a very public target this afternoon. And because I have information about who really destroyed your wedding. His tone was grandfatherly, almost kind. I think we can help each other. I know who destroyed my wedding.
Do you?
Or do you only know what Damien Russo told you? A pause. Come to the Polk Street warehouse at 10 p.m.
Come alone.
Let's talk like civilized people. The line went dead. Elena immediately called Damien. Absolutely not, Damien said for the second time that day. They were in his SUV, parked 3 blocks from Elena's apartment. She'd insisted on this conversation happening face to face. He's trying to isolate you, Damien continued. Get you alone, use you as leverage against me, or worse. I know what he's trying to do, Elena interrupted. But think about it. He's scared. I flipped his plan this afternoon, and now he's scrambling. Why would he risk calling me directly unless he's desperate? Desperate men are dangerous men. So we used that. Elena leaned forward. You said Salvatore taught you to think 3 moves ahead. So, what's his 3rd move? Damien was quiet, processing. He calls you, Damien said slowly. Expects you to tell me. Expects me to either stop you from going or insist on coming with you. Either way, it positions me as controlling, proves his point that I'm compromised. But what if I go? Elena asked. He'd kill you. Would he? Elena challenged. Think about it. I just went on national television. If I disappear or turn up dead right after calling him out, even without saying his name, everyone will know who did it. He'd be signing his own death warrant. Marco, sitting in the driver's seat, spoke up. She's right. Salvatore's too smart for that. But he might try to turn her, use her against you in some other way. So we let him try, Elena said. And we record everything. Get him on tape admitting what he did. Then we have proof, not just accusations. Damien shook his head. It's too dangerous. Everything is dangerous now, Elena said. The question is whether we stay on defense or go on offense. She could see Damien calculating, the same way he probably calculated every move in his world. Risk versus reward. Trust versus control. If I do this, Elena said quietly, you have to actually let me do it. No swooping in at the last second. No 600 SUVs. You have to trust that I can handle this. You're asking me to use you as bait. I'm asking you to let me be part of my own rescue. At 9:45 p.m., Elena walked into the Polk Street warehouse alone. Or so it appeared. She was wired, a tiny microphone disguised as a button on her jacket, courtesy of Damien's tech specialist. Her phone's GPS was being tracked by 3 different systems. And on the surrounding rooftops, Damien had positioned snipers with orders to watch but not engage unless absolutely necessary. Elena was the visible piece. But she wasn't alone. Salvatore stood in the center of the empty warehouse, exactly where he said he'd be. 2 men flanked him, bodyguards clearly. Miss Martinez, Salvatore said warmly. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, Elena said. Why am I here?
Direct.
I like that, Salvatore gestured around the warehouse. This is where I taught Damien everything he knows. Did he tell you that? He mentioned it. I doubt he mentioned that this is also where I taught him that loyalty is weakness. That attachment is vulnerability. That in our world, caring about someone is the same as handing your enemy a loaded gun. Salvatore's smile faded. You're his loaded gun, Miss Martinez. Then why call me here? Why not just pull the trigger? Because I'm giving you a choice. Salvatore stepped closer. Walk away. Publicly distance yourself from Damien. Go back to your normal life. I'll ensure your family stays safe, your wedding disaster fades from memory, and you can start over. And if I don't, then you'll watch everyone you love suffer for his arrogance. Elena's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. You already made Jason suffer. Already destroyed my wedding. What's left? So much more than you can imagine. Here's what I imagine, Elena said, her voice carrying through the empty space. I imagine a scared old man who's losing power and needs to take down the person who replaced him. I imagine someone so desperate that he has to threaten civilians because he can't win against Damien directly. Salvatore's expression darkened. Careful, girl. You targeted me because you thought I was weak. Because you thought using me would break Damien. Elena stepped closer. But all you did was give him proof. Proof that you're not the mentor he remembers. You're just another bully who hides behind threats. I don't hide behind anything, Salvatore snarled, his grandfatherly mask slipping. I built this city's underworld. I taught Damien everything. And I'll destroy him for forgetting who made him. He stopped, realizing what he'd just said. Elena smiled. Thank you. The warehouse lights blazed to life. Doors opened from every direction. Not Damien's men, police. Federal agents. District attorney investigators. Salvatore spun, shock replacing rage. From the shadows, Damien emerged, Marco beside him. But they weren't leading the charge. Behind them came Richard Hartwell, pale and shaking, a federal agent guiding him forward. Jason's father flipped this morning, Damien said calmly. Gave us everything. Bank records, text messages, witness testimony about your blackmail operations. 12 families you've threatened over the past 2 years. Evidence of money laundering, extortion, racketeering. Salvatore stared at Richard. You You threatened my grandchildren, Richard whispered. I recorded everything. The federal agents moved in. Salvatore's bodyguards stepped back, hands raised. They weren't stupid enough to fight law enforcement. Damien, Salvatore said, his voice eerily calm. You really called the police? After everything I taught you. You taught me to think 3 moves ahead, Damien replied. I thought 4. As agents handcuffed him, Salvatore looked at Elena one last time. Clever girl, he said, almost admiringly. He's going to get you killed. Maybe, Elena said, but not today. 3 weeks later, Chicago returned to something resembling normal. Salvatore Moretti's arrest made headlines for 5 days before the news cycle moved on to the next scandal. Federal prosecutors had enough evidence to guarantee he'd spend his remaining years in prison. His organization crumbled without him. Some lieutenants flipped, others disappeared. A few tried to hold territory and failed. Damien absorbed the useful pieces and eliminated the rest. Quietly, efficiently, the way wars are actually won, not with 600 SUVs, but with patience and precision. Jason Hartwell's betrayal became public knowledge when Richard testified. The lawsuit was dropped. Jason himself remained in witness protection somewhere on the West Coast, probably living under a different name, probably wondering if he'd ever stop looking over his shoulder. Elena didn't think about him much anymore. The anger had burned through her system like a fever, leaving behind something clearer. Not forgiveness. She wasn't ready for that, but acceptance. Jason had been a chapter of her life that ended badly. That was all. The media attention faded faster than she'd expected. People found new dramas to obsess over. The wedding video stopped showing up in her social media feeds. The reporters stopped camping outside her parents' apartment. Life moved on the way it always does. Rosa Martinez stopped clutching her rosary quite so tightly. Miguel returned his routine, coffee at dawn, reading the paper, long walks through the neighborhood. The boarded-up window was finally repaired. Uncle Carlos called to apologize, though Elena suspected his wife Linda had forced him to do it. The neighborhood gossip shifted from scandal to grudging respect. The girl who'd been left at the altar had helped take down a mob boss. That earned a different kind of attention, the kind that came with nods of approval and cautious pride. La Valiente, Mrs. Rodriguez started calling her. The brave one. Elena wasn't sure about brave. Mostly, she felt tired. She found Damien in Archer Park on a Sunday afternoon in late October. The same park where they'd played as kids, before the world got complicated. The baseball diamond was empty, the swings swayed gently in the breeze, and fallen leaves covered the ground in shades of gold and crimson. He sat on the same bench where his mother used to watch them play, back when Sophia was still alive and the future seemed simpler. Elena sat beside him, without saying hello. They'd been texting on and off for the past 3 weeks, practical updates about the case, about security, about nothing important. But they hadn't seen each other since the warehouse. Since everything changed again. You look different, Damien said. Elena glanced down at herself, jeans, an old Northwestern sweatshirt, sneakers. Her hair was in a simple ponytail.
No makeup.
No wedding dress. No cameras. I look like myself, she corrected. Yeah, he agreed. You do. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a father push his daughter on the swings. The sound of her laughter carried across the park. Marco says your people are leaving my family alone, Elena said finally. They were never bothering them, just watching, making sure Salvatore's leftover people didn't try anything stupid. And now Salvatore's people are gone and the watching is less visible. Elena nodded. She'd noticed. The SUVs that occasionally appeared on her street had become more subtle. Still there, but from a distance. My father wants to thank you, Elena said. Properly.
Dinner, maybe.
Normal dinner, not mob dinner. Damien smiled slightly. I'd like that. More silence. Not awkward, just heavy with things unsaid. Do you remember, Elena asked, the summer we tried to build a treehouse in Mrs. Chen's backyard? We got about 3 boards nailed up before her husband chased us off with a broom. You fell and broke your arm. You told the ER nurse I'd fallen off my bike because you didn't want me to get in trouble. Damien shook his head. You always tried to protect people. Even then. Look where that got me, Elena said, but there was no bitterness in it. Just fact. Damien turned to face her. Where it got you is here. Still standing. Still fighting. That counts for something. My father saved your life once, Elena said softly, echoing the words from the ballroom 3 weeks ago. And now, Damien replied, you helped me take it back. The words hung between them, an acknowledgement of debt, of partnership, of something shifting. Elena looked at him, really looked at him. The scar through his eyebrow, the weight he carried in his shoulders, the darkness that came with his world. But underneath, she still saw flashes of the boy who'd taught her how to throw a curveball, who'd cried at his mother's grave, who disappeared for 8 years, but never really left. What happens now? She asked. I don't know, Damien admitted. The honest answer? I don't know if we can be friends. I don't know if my world and yours can exist in the same space without one destroying the other. But I'd like to try. If you would. Elena considered this. The smart choice would be to walk away. Go back to her life. Find a new normal. Forget that Damien Russo existed beyond childhood memories. But she'd spent 3 weeks learning that she was tired of smart choices. Tired of safe choices. Tired of letting other people decide what she deserved. My father saved your life for a reason, Elena said. Because he thought you were worth saving. I think he was right. Something shifted in Damien's expression. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Or something neither of them had names for yet. One condition, Elena added. No more 600 SUVs unless I specifically ask for them. Damien laughed. Real and genuine.
Deal.
They sat on that bench as afternoon turned to evening, 2 people who'd started on the same broken streets and found their way back through blood and chaos, and something that felt like trust. The childhood bond that began with summer baseball and shared grief had been tested by time, violence, and circumstance. Now, it was becoming something new, not quite friendship, not quite romance, but something uniquely theirs. The spark of something more. And for the first time in weeks, Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't ending.